All right, welcome back to the Chefpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Andres Hinojosa. I have a very special guest today. I'm excited to introduce her. But before I do that, I want to make sure you guys hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, make sure that you're tuning in to the channel here. And we just love having you guys here. Want to wish you guys a happy New Year's Eve. I'm excited for this coming year. 2025 is going to be a great year for all of us, and I speak that as well into existence. And so, again, if you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so. Make sure you hit that like button. And we just love to really try to impart as many tips and tricks and really interview chefs as well that are personal chefs or that are chefs in the industry. And that's really, really exciting. And so, without further ado, I want to announce our guest today, Chef Lorraine Goodrich out of Prairie Village, Kansas. I'm really excited to bring her up. And let's get her on the podcast. Chef, how are you doing today? Welcome to the podcast.
Doing great. Doing great. Thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Really excited as well to have you here. And just to kind of start off, like I say on the podcast, I like to just kind of dive in and ask some questions of you and get to know you a little bit and have the audience get to know you as well. I know we were talking a little bit before the show. I like what you said. You're like, okay, couple strangers or acquaintances meeting at a bar and kind of
Yeah.
coming in to talk to each other. But I want to just first ask you, like, how did you find out about Chefpreneur as we were kind of discussing a little bit before the show? Tell us that first, and then we'll dive into your story.
Well, I believe I was exploring different food groups on LinkedIn, and I was trying to see, being a chef's kind of lonely in a lot of ways. So I'm always looking for connections with other chefs, and
Mm.
also being a personal chef can be kind of isolating. So anyway, I believe I found your group on LinkedIn, and I'm like, oh, Chefpreneur, and it reminded me of like a portmanteau, like brunch is breakfast and lunch. So
Yeah.
I appreciated the creativity of taking chef and adding entrepreneur. And my most of my career, my life has been doing entrepreneurial type things. And I just recently, started doing personal chef work. So the term chefpreneur just really spoke to me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's funny you mentioned that. We are very community driven in the sense of, like, I do feel that there's a lot of chefs that don't have community per se. Like, I think that's just not only in the personal chef space, but I think just in general as chefs.
Mhm.
I think it's kind of funny that we're comrades. We kind of come around each other. We have these talks, but then there's a lot of chefs that are also very competitive with each other and dog each
Mhm.
other. Which
Mhm.
the community that we've built here at Chefpreneur is much more loving and open with each other, right? So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. So with that being said, Chef, I'd like to just dive into a little bit about you. Tell us how you started. Let's start from kind of a little bit of the beginning. How did you start to come about cooking and really going down more of a career path with cooking?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna just tell a story from when I was very young, 6 years old, because that really is when I caught the bug. So I'm the youngest of 3 children. So when you're the youngest of 3 children, you get ignored and, you're like an heir, a spare, and then you're the spare. So you're not very important in the family dynamic, or at least you don't feel that way. And so my mom used to get me the Sesame Street magazine. And one week or one month on the back of the Sesame Street magazine was Cookie Monster had a recipe for baking oatmeal raisin cookies. And I'm like, oh, I want to do that. And she's like, okay, you can do that. So that's the very first time, like I was in the kitchen wearing the apron. She let me mix it up. She let me do everything but touch the oven. And so I made the cookies. And what was so important, what the payoff was my father took a bite of one. He was like, oh my God, these are, like dads do. These are the best cookies ever. And I was like, oh, wow. And so every time I cook, I think, that imprints you so young. You kind of have that memory forever. It's just a
Yeah,
special, very special memory.
I
So
love that.
yeah, so from there, I would cook with my grandma. We So I'm originally from New York. My dad was born in Brooklyn. My family's from upstate New York. And so my grandparents lived in upstate New York as well, and I'd go up there for the summers. So we'd go pick berries. I'd go pick berries with my grandpa, and then we'd bring them home. And then my grandma would teach me how to make a pie crust, and we'd bake the pie from the berries we just picked, which
Oh,
is such an oh, it's just a beautiful childhood memory, and it just shows you like, okay, this is what you do. You go, you gather the food, you bring it home, you clean it, you prep it, you prepare it, and then you have to wait. You can't have pie right when it comes out the you have to eat your dinner, clean your plate, and then you get your pie. So it's all that, work and then reward and that kind of thing. So that was pretty cool too. That imprinted a lot upon me as far as growing your own food and that kind of thing. And raspberry pie to this day is my favorite pie.
ooh, I don't think I've ever had a raspberry pie. That sounds delicious. I
Really?
love raspberries.
Oh my gosh. I'll have to bake you a raspberry pie someday with
Absolutely.
homemade
I would
bread.
love
Oh
that.
yeah, it's amazing. So anyway, from there, like my first job, I started working at Dairy Queen, which isn't that much about food. I mean, it is, but I mean, ice cream makes everybody happy. So I guess that pattern continues. You hand a dipped cone to a child or a hot fudge sundae, and like that, you just see them light up. So that's
Yeah.
that's always fun. And then just continuing on, I've done some entrepreneurial things. I owned a cafe deli in the Kansas City area. I also owned a staffing agency for food and hospitality. I did that for a long time. So I was in the back rooms of all the and the kitchens of all the hotels and the restaurants, and we used to place cooks and dishwashers and chefs, but mainly banquet servers, bartenders. So that was called food staff specialists. And I did that for about 10 years overall. And then from then just recently moved on to I so post pandemic I was unemployed for a long time. And
Mm.
then as we were coming out of pandemic, I started walking dogs because I, as most people, gained some weight over a pandemic. So I lost 12 pounds in 3 months walking dogs. If anybody's looking for a way to lose weight, walk dogs because you get paid to lose weight,
Lose weight.
basically.
I love that.
Yeah. And so now I'm a personal chef for a family that I was walking dogs for. And I had started cooking for another family, and I kind of mentioned a few things to this family. And she's like, well, we need somebody to pick our kids up from school. And I'm like, well, I'm a
Mm.
chef, but I'm also a mom, so I can do that. But I'm interested. So we came to a meeting of the minds, and so it's worked out great. I've been with them for like 3.5 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And
Okay.
they have a gorgeous house, and I'm currently house sitting for them because they're in Mexico right now. So
Very nice. And now
yeah.
you're in the Prairie Village area of like how far are you from Kansas City?
Oh, I'm a mile from the border. So Kansas
Oh,
City, we have Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas, but I'm a mile west of Missouri. So State Line Road is just a minute away. And then
okay.
the family I work for lives in Leawood, which we had previously talked about, which is where Taylor Swift and Travis Kelsey live. I think that's important to point that out because you never know. You could run into her at the Whole Foods. She
Yeah.
might go there.
Yeah, for all the Swifties out there.
Yeah. Yep. So that was exciting when now and I guess she's here right now since her tour ended. So she actually has gone to some restaurants. I think they had a birthday celebration for her at one of the restaurants down by the plaza.
Very nice.
So
Very
yeah,
nice.
they have a personal chef. So if you're listening, Taylor, I'm available, and Travis. Uh,
That's
if
good.
you
Make
need
that
me to
plug. I
fill
love
in,
it.
yeah, if you need a raspberry pie.
Now, I have to ask, I see that you've obviously signed in, and I know that from the show notes and the things previously, um, you call yourself Quiche Lorraine
Yeah.
Goodrich. Give me a little bit of background about that. I mean, obviously it's a really cool play on your name of Lorraine, but um, do you like making quiche? Is that something that you specialize
I
in?
I do like making quiche. How I got the name originally is I was like a junior in high school, and my friend was into the B-52s, which is kind of I think most people know the B-52s, right? Kind of a punk rock. They did Love Shack, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they had a song called Quiche Lorraine on one of their albums. It's about a poodle dyed dark green that wears designer
Mm.
jeans. His name is Quiche Lorraine, blah, blah, blah. So that was the first time I'd ever seen my name like in a song with something else. So that just became, it just stuck. That just became my nickname. And then it's a great name in a kitchen. Orders up quiche. Okay, grab your, come get your cheeseburger quiche or whatever. It's a it's a great kitchen name as opposed to Lorraine, which is, more syllables. So it's just stuck. And then I don't know, am I leading the wrong way? So this is actually an original work of art. I catered an art opening for a local Kansas City artist named Mike Savage, and he made me this hand painted apron. And this, I
So
think,
beautiful.
thank you. I love his art. I have other pieces of his art in my house, but I think that's supposed to be paella because these are like giant prawns, and that's obviously beer, alcohol, more beer. But anyway,
That's a
he,
party on an apron.
if you ever come to Kansas City and go to many restaurants, his art is featured in a lot of local restaurants. So
That's really cool. That's
yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. So you've been cooking a while. You've been cooking quite a long time.
Well, I'm not going to say how old I am if that's what that question was, but yeah, since I was 6. So at
Okay.
least 30 or more years.
There you go. I like that. Yeah. I like that. You don't look a day over 25.
Thank you. Thank you. I get carded all the time.
There you go. Well, that's awesome. I mean, one of the things that I feel like as well that I wanted to ask you was, it's a different it's funny because you tend to have, I can tell that you have some of that bravado and some of that, I don't want to say toot in a bad way, right? But like that New York that New York feel to you,
Yes,
but yet you're
definitely.
in Kansas, right? So it's
Yeah.
like it's
Oh yeah, you're hitting on it.
a
You're picking
little bit
that
of a shock as far as like the transferring of that as far as
up.
the
Mhm.
culture goes. I mean, when I was culture shocked when I was young. I was born and raised in San Diego, and then when I moved to Iowa,
Ah,
I was like, "What is this?" Right? Like,
Iowa?
yes, yeah,
Oh my God, I was
I know.
born in Iowa. That's crazy.
Yeah, but but how do you feel like you adjust? Like you were living obviously in New York, you said correct, and then you moved.
Well, no, I was more of a glint in the eye. My father was born in Brooklyn. My mom was born upstate. They met in New York, got married in New York, had my brother and sister in upstate New York. And then we moved to Iowa and they had me, Newton, Iowa, home of Maytag blue cheese. A lot
Yep.
of chefs know that one. And then we moved to Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, and then Kansas. But
Okay, so
I was 7 when we moved to Kansas. So
you've
this
been
is
kind of
basically,
around this
yeah, it's a
midwestern,
weird
southwestern, northwest
triangle.
or
Yep.
northeastern.
But here's the key, Andre. We always went back to upstate New York in the summer, and my parents bought a lake house in the Adirondacks. So we got to see our cousins and our aunts and our uncles and have those New York experiences of like we picked blueberries, picked raspberries, you know, most the cuisine of upstate New York, which at that time was pretty much Italian and seafood.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty limited. They didn't have Mexican food up there at all. This was like in the 80s. So anyway, yeah, I've always felt like a fish out of water here. And, I don't call it pop, I call it soda, things like that. Like I'll never call a can of soda pop.
Yeah, it's
Just,
Iowa's pop for sure. What's kind of
oh
funny is
yeah.
in the West Coast,
We
growing
call it
up, it was called soda. Like I called
oh,
it
okay.
soda my entire life. And then in the Midwest, they called it pop. And then I've actually
Yeah.
visited Pennsylvania with some clients quite a bit of years ago, and they were all calling it soda pop. And I'm like, what is it? Like a big equation, right? Soda plus pop equals soda pop or something. I don't know. Maybe the more West people went out back in the day, they just start taking off some of the words. But
Yeah.
that's I love how much you've traveled. So you've kind of probably gained influences from everywhere that you've lived, and some of that again
Oh yeah.
being the southeast, some of it being the northeast, some of it being basically the heartland, right? The Midwest. Obviously you were born in
Mhm.
Iowa, so um,
Well,
you know,
also, where I've traveled as an adult, like, I've been to New Orleans 11 times, and it's the food. It's the food, and I had the distinct pleasure of taking my daughter there this year, and she's 20, and I wasn't sure if she'd like it as much as me and she's like, "Oh my god, mom, I keep thinking about the food. I keep thinking about all the food in New Orleans." We never had a bad meal, and there's so much variety, even though it's basically, Cajun Creole cooking. It's just it's amazing. And then I've also taken her to Spain and I've been to Mexico a few times. So you always are learning as a cook. That's the best thing about being a chef. It's not limited. It's only limited by if you have a closed mind. If you have an open mind and you're a chef, it's endless. You can learn new things every day for the rest of your life.
I love that. I love that. What would you say, Chef? One question I have for you. What would you say is one of your greatest passions as far as with cooking, specifically for people? I always try to ask that question because I think it really just reveals things about who we are as chefs, but also just you as a person. What do you feel like is your biggest passion when it comes to serving people?
My biggest passion is to educate people, especially the ones I work for, that they don't have to buy, to me, what are the toxic foods, like the things with partially hydrogenated oils, like
Mhm.
Oreo cookies and Cheez-Its and that kind of thing. And that we can make fresh food that tastes great. And,
Yeah.
to shop the perimeter of the grocery store, like Michael Pollan talks about in his book, avoid the interior. And I mean, these diets, I cook for people that are vegetarian and keto, and that's fine. But I really think there's a reason why people have eaten bread for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and it's delicious. I
Yeah.
love bread. Like, how can it be wrong if it feels so right?
Yeah. I love that.
I mean,
And
there's health and that being said, there's healthier breads. There's breads that will never get moldy. Like, I'll buy a loaf of, I call it like chemical bread, and it'll sit on the shelf and yeah, that's bread. But like here in Kansas City, we have farm to market bakery, so I get their sourdough bread. Now, eventually that will go moldy, but it's delicious, it's fresh, it's a local business, and sourdough is really good for you. If you suffer from GERD because of the acidity in the bread, helps you break down, your food, that kind of thing. So anyway, the more you know about your food, it just can't be, overstated that the more research you do about your food. And then also Hippocrates, let thy food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy food, you
Mhm.
know,
I like that.
just yeah, just always be thinking about what you're putting in your body, the chemicals, the dyes, and, you know, I sometimes just toss stuff in the trash that I see in their pantry. Don't tell them
Yeah. No.
because
No,
it's
we won't
bad
say
for them.
anything even though we're on a podcast. We won't say anything. But,
Okay.
like, that's the thing is, like, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think that it's becoming more and more apparent that, you know, how do some of these disease rates go sky high,
Mm.
yet
Mhm.
we have more access to gyms and exercise and, all those fancy dancy bikes, the Peloton, I mean, everything else, but it's
Right.
really about going back to the basics of the nourishment and the food. And I'm 100% in agreement with you on that. And I think, I don't want to get off subject here, but I kind of gotta say it because, when I talk to other chefs, I really like, and also just people like a lot of people at my church, I'll talk to them about it. And some people will associate healthy food with like
Not tasty.
something low fat, or like, oh, it's gluten free, or it's whatever. Now, I'm not saying that there's not, of course, intolerances that people have, gotten and things like that, but instead of it being so much more about like what is quote unquote bad, it's more of like, if here's how I put it, is the product or the ingredient bad, or is it the quality of the product ingredient, right?
Mm.
Like, For
Mhm.
instance, people will say like, "Oh, dairy milk is so bad for your body."
Yeah.
Yet it's like raw milk is really nutritious for you, right? So like I'll have these debates where it's like, I don't know how carrageenan, gargum, and almond with water is better for me than all the actual good bacteria, healthy bacteria in raw pasture raised, pasture grass fed,
Right.
cows that are delivering raw milk, right? So, but unfortunately, I agree with people that your commercial dairy, ultra processed, ultra pasteurized, all homogenized, which I want to get
Mhm.
into all that, but people just go do your own research on homogenization. It's not good for you. It's because they want to encapsulate the fat and all the molecules, and then your body can't really break down and get
Right.
to the stored fat. And then what does it do? Your body starts to reject it. And people are like, "Oh, I'm lactose intolerant." No, you're actually just your body has created that because of what the commercial milk is. So I'm a huge believer in that, right? Where we have people that really feel that like these animal products are bad for you. However, they're actually partially right, because if they're talking about the specific
Mhm.
animal products that are out there commercially, they're horrible for you. But the
Mhm.
but unfortunately, again, what is the beef that you're eating? I don't want to go out and say beef is bad.
Right.
I don't want to say
Right.
dairy is bad. It's just what is the
Right.
quality, where it's coming from, and those are the types of things. So it sounds like you're really more into I wouldn't even say nutrition in that sense, but more educating people about just real food. And I
Yeah.
think that's something I'm very passionate about as well. So that's awesome. I mean, I really believe that people again are starting to wake up a little bit more to understand these things, and I hope that us chefs as well. I think we have a level of a duty to kind of help encourage those things. And most chefs, like it sounds like you, chef, like to do or like to have as many local products as possible.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Yeah,
you
I
were
believe
saying
in
with the bread and
supporting.
things like that.
I don't like, and I also boycott a few places. I don't know if you want me to say this or not, but again, like, I don't go to Walmart, that
Yeah,
kind of thing,
yeah,
just based on principle. But, yeah, I'd much rather spend my money with local businesses, local grocery stores, local purveyors, and the grocery stores that support the local purveyors of
yeah.
what I consider quality items. We just had a they won the James Beard Award. It's called Yoli Tor let me see if I can say it, Tortilla Yaria. So it's like they make tortillas and they make
Mhm.
tortilla chips. And so I solely try to buy those. It's been hard to find them, but they just won that award because the products are just astounding. They're amazing.
Yeah, there's so many things like that. That's really cool that you mentioned it. It's like Stone Ground. I think that's the Sonoran style, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
I've heard of the brand. Really, really good. And there's more and more brands coming out that way, where I think that's where we need to get back to. And unfortunately, they have to be more
Mhm.
expensive because the better ingredients are more expensive, and it actually should be
Mhm.
the other way around. But that's another conversation. But like we won't get into that. But no, I love that about you. So, man, thank you for sharing all that with us,
Oh,
Chef. I
sure.
really think that it got us an understanding of who you are. And I actually like doing these podcasts where a lot of people might think that I bring people on the podcast and I know all these things about them. And of course, some people I have brought on the podcast are some of my students and people that I've mentored personally and all that. But I actually love having guests like you on, where you've been following Chefpreneur for a while, a little bit, and you've seen our stuff, you've been part of our stuff, you're on our email list and things like that. But we've never had an actual conversation. So I actually like it because we're able to have a conversation here. So with that being said, I'd love for you to I'd love to flip the script a little bit and let you dive into any questions you have for me. I felt like I got to know you, and just wanted to know and open the floor up for you to say, hey, what can I answer for you?
So, where did you go to chef school? Where did you get your training?
Yeah, great question. So I went to culinary school at the CCA, which stands for California Culinary Academy in San Francisco. The school no longer exists.
Mm.
However, it was a Le Cordon Bleu when I went there. Supposedly, it was the like number two behind the CIA in New York. It was just
Oh, okay.
obviously on the other end of the U.S. there, so it was complete opposite of Hyde Park. Right, it was up in San Francisco, but that's where I went to culinary school back in 2000. technically 2003 to 2004. Graduated an associate's degree in culinary arts from there.
And what's your earliest memory of a food that you tasted and like it blew your mind?
Ooh, well,
Like
that's a good
maybe you
question.
were with your mom or your grandma or somebody in the kitchen. Like,
Well,
do you have any?
it was totally my grandma.
Okay.
My grandma Carmen, which I called my yaya, was like my inspiration. I think is where I probably got my love for food the most. I've been asked that question many times, like, "Hey, when did you know that you wanted to be a chef?" Or I get that question a lot, and I honestly sometimes don't know like the exact year because I think since I was young, I was just infatuated with food from my grandmother.
Right.
She used to put me on the counter when she used to make her
Yeah.
homemade fresh bread, and she's from Chile. My dad is from South America, so
Okay.
she did not know. I was telling the story to somebody the other day. She did not know like what canned chicken soup was when we went to back in the day when it was called Price Club a long time ago in San Diego
Mhm.
before it was Costco. She was blown away by there was like chicken soup in a can. She didn't know what that meant. She was like, it was hard for her to process that 'cause she didn't know when she came to the States some of those things. So she was very traditional, everything made from scratch. I mean, even juices she would buy at the Mexican market, like the bruised, strawberries and the bruised
Oh yeah.
berries, and like trim them up, the 50-cent little container ones and trim off all the little moldy and the little like they didn't
Mhm.
sell moldy ones, but like the bruised ones and all that they would sell trying to get rid of. And she'd blend that up with like honey and water, and that was like strawberry juice in the fridge for me. So
Oh,
like,
nice.
yeah,
Wow.
very, very, very
That's very fresh,
natural
very
approach
healthy.
on things. And
Mhm.
so and very proper. As weird as it sounds, Chilean people tend to be very proper. They don't like a bunch of bottles of ketchup and mustard on the table. Like it's very kind of impolite. Everything has to be with a little spoon and a little dish. And she was very proper. I mean, she had her. I always tell people she made her own apron. She had this beautiful like apron that she made, right, with the frillies and everything. She always had her
Mhm.
pearl earrings. A lot of times her pearl necklace, her high heels on, and her dress. I mean, she'd dress in a dress most like I don't think I only saw her in sweater and pants only a few times in my life. But she didn't. The only time I didn't see her in an apron was when she was at church on Sunday. Otherwise, she
Mm.
was always in an apron in the house. And I got blessed because she kind of helped take care of us as we were growing up. She'd live with us for a while. So when my mom and my dad were working, she would be there. And yeah, I mean, I was spoiled as the youngest of me and my sister. So, um, but
The
I would
little
say
Latin king. You were the little Latin king, right?
I was, yeah. And actually, a lot of people tell me that she wasn't exactly the most. She was obviously she was sweet and things, but she was a little bit more of a not so warming, like huggy type of person to
Mm.
everybody except I. It's funny because I grew up and I'm like, oh, my grandma, she just like she would always pour out her love to me, and then my sister even was like, yeah, it's because you were her little Andresito for everybody else. She was a
You
little
were
bit
the
more
little
direct,
what? What did you say?
little bit more stern. So
Oh, oh.
yeah, so no,
You were the
Andresito is what
gentle.
you called me. Andresito is like when you say
Oh, Antonio. Okay.
yeah, yeah, like it's like my little Andres, right? So yeah, I kind of got a little bit of a different treatment than everybody else. I think I
Mhm.
was like the prized possession for her, but I would say to go back to like my food memory though, like specifically what I miss her making. So she made this homemade bread called pan amasado. It's a Chilean style bread. It's a very traditional round, kind of elevated, whatever. I make it for my daughter. Um, all my daughters love it, but like my Elena Grace, my second youngest, just goes nuts over it. But
Mm.
she would take that. She'd make 7 every single morning, and I don't know if that was just her recipe. It was always 7. She'd make it
Mhm.
daily, and then she would take it out of the oven. She'd let it set a little bit. She'd cut it open. She'd toast it a little bit. She'd put butter, avocado, salt, and a really thin slice of ham, and then she'd make me a little tiny espresso cup, which really it was
Mm.
more like sugary milk with like a little instant coffee in it, just
This?
like that. Yep, a little white one, and she would serve it to me, and I would have
Oh,
my little avocado, I guess you'd say bread or toast
yeah.
before it was a thing, right? Before
Wow.
everybody was like avocado toast, because it's very traditional in Chile to eat, and they call avocado palta. They don't call it aguacate. They don't call it avocado. They
Hmm.
call it palta. And so, yeah, that was like one of my fondest memories. And of course,
Wow.
every Chilean, if there's any Chileans watching this or watching this at all, but Chileans for some reason have an affinity for jam, especially apricot jam. So, like my grandma had apricot jam coming out of her
Mhm.
ears all the time. She'd make it. It's very, very popular there. So they have a lot of toast with jam, and it's a whole thing. And she would sometimes toast her bread like dark. She liked it dark, which most Chileans
Mhm.
do, and then butter and jam on it. So that was her thing. But I like the avocado and ham. So that was probably my first, like, not my first, I can't even remember, but that was just
Well,
something
something
that
that
is
you
burned in my
recall. Yeah,
memory.
you recall. And what you're actually recalling is how she made you feel because she was
Yes.
making you these special things and but, we it's like the sixth love language, cooking for people,
Oh, yeah.
feeding people. It should be in that love languages book, but, 'cause that's how I view it, and, like, I'll even for the family I work for, the mother travels a lot because she's, like, a partner in a law firm, and
Mm.
so if she's gone, I'll cook things that I know the other 3 like, and then when she comes back, I try to do a homecoming dinner of something I know she likes, like, she really loves I make a chicken pot pie, but I do phyllo dough on top.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but I found a new technique. I don't lay it flat anymore. I take it and I wad it up kinda like a Kleenex, and you just dot the top of the chicken pot pie, and then you drizzle it with the butter, and th they love that. So that's one of her favorites, and then she also likes my moussaka, so I like to do that for her. That's a lot of work, but
That's a lot of work, but it's an amazing dish. That's one of my favorite
it
Greek
is.
dishes.
Yeah, I love Greek food as well, so
That's
have you
awesome.
traveled very much? Have you gone back to Chile and
No,
gone back
I wanna go badly. We have 5 daughters, so, buying plane tickets to go down there, you have
Mm.
to make sure that you got about 20K probably in the bank in order for it to
Oh,
happen.
oh,
But it
wow. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it would be a trip, but I mean,
yeah.
my grandmother unfortunately has passed. My grandfather
Mm,
is still alive. We don't have any family as far as on my dad's side in the US at all. Everybody's in Chile. And then my dad lives right now currently in Estonia. And so him and his wife and my half brother live in Estonia. So he's very far
oh,
away from us as well. And then my mom currently still lives in San Diego and she's near my sister in
mm,
San Diego. So kind of a little bit all spread out. And then my mom's side,
right.
of the family. So my yaya was my dad's mother, of course, and then my grandmother on my mom's side, or my her mom, obviously, is also passed. My grandfather and grandpa, but they were from Iowa, so I lived with them for a few years in Iowa. And my grandmother on my mom's side was actually a phenomenal cook as well. Very different than my grandmother from Chile, of
Mm,
course, but she used to make these homemade egg noodles with her beef stroganoff, which was like leftover pot roast thickened up with,
mm,
basically a roux and the beef broth and all that stuff. And that
mhm.
was really yummy. So she made really good rolls. She made some good stuff. And if she was mad at my grandfather, he was going to have to pop his own popcorn for supper. That's how it worked. And so that's literally what he would do. If she was upset with him, she's like, "John, you're eating popcorn tonight." And he's like, "Okay." And he'd sit there and make his big old bowl of popcorn. That'd be his supper for the night. So, yeah, very different worlds, but two different memories that I had with both.
Mm,
But definitely my grandma Carmen is definitely probably where I got the inspiration the most.
right. So what was your first job in, like, cooking and that kinda
Well,
thing?
in hospitality, I was a server at a truck stop in Iowa, but then actually was that my first job or my second job? I can't remember. But
Like
my
a
real
like a
first like
grocery.
anything dealing with food was actually Subway.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yep, I was a sandwich artiste and slang some sandwiches and subs there in a small town of Webster City, Iowa, a home of
Mhm.
9,000 people. And smelt like crap every time I got out of work, right? Because that nasty commercial chemical probably bread. But that was my first real kind of food job, and then I tried to get a job at the nursing home there in the kitchen because my wife, believe it or not, who is not a chef or a cook in that sense, but she was a cook at the nursing home.
Oh,
And
wow.
tried to get a job there and they wouldn't let me. So I was like, okay, cool. So went on with my, I don't know if it was because she was there and she was my girlfriend.
Right. They got a
Could have been.
policy
That could have
against.
been it. But I mean, no, that was my early years there. And yeah, so that was my first food job.
So when did you progress into becoming a chef? Like, did you ever own your own restaurant or?
Nope.
uh,
My background was so when I was graduated high school in Iowa, I graduated very young because I skipped first grade.
mm,
And then I enrolled at the culinary school right after high school. So I went out and flew out, started school right when I graduated in 2003 in San Francisco. And then I graduated culinary school, and I was technically my graduation date was about 22 days before I turned 18. I graduated culinary school. And then my first job when I was 18, I did my externship at in Chicago area at Levy Restaurants at the Indian Lakes
oh yeah.
Resort out in Bloomingdale. And
Hmm.
then from there, got a job downtown Chicago at the Ritz Carlton. And so basically, I've never actually worked I mean, worked in restaurants and hotels, of course, because I was
Right.
leading the team at times, but didn't work in any standalone restaurants, just worked all for luxury hotels, the Ritz Carlton in Chicago. Then I transferred to the Four Seasons in Aviara, which is in San Diego.
Mm.
Then I became the Garmin J chef at the convention center in San Diego for a brief time. Then I went to opening up the Hilton Oceanfront Resorts called Cape Ray now. I was the executive chef, executive sous chef there, and I was overseeing the restaurant and a lot of the operations. But I opened that hotel. That was a really cool experience to be able to walk, dirt, and then like hire the whole staff and hire the whole F&B team with Chef Pascal. And then from there, I became the executive chef over at the Sheraton Carlsbad Resort across from Legoland. And then from there, I started my own business almost 12 or
Oh,
13 years ago. So
and that's all. Those last jobs were all in San Diego or Southern California.
all San Diego. Yep. Southern
Yeah, yeah.
California. Yep. Southern California. So yeah, Chicago. I worked in Chicago. Technically, I had a little job here and there in San Francisco. I did some staging at like Roxanne Klein's restaurant. That was a raw restaurant, really high end in
Oh,
Larkspur. And then I did like teacher's assistant stuff because my schedule, I tend to be an overachiever at some things. I was like doubling up on all my classes. So I wanted to get my degree really quickly. I got like my associate's in 15 months in San Francisco. I doubled up on classes and did all that. And so, yeah. And then I started my first catering company called Picada. That was back in
mm,
2013 ish. And then that lasted all but about 8 to 9 months because it was just doing farmers markets and stuff. There was just no money in it. It was really difficult. I
yeah.
had to get all the equipment and all that. And then got a brief private chef job for a person who used to own a hotel I worked at. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I was the
Mm.
banquet chef at the Grand Del Mar, which is another. We got 5-star, 5 diamond when I was there. That was really exciting. We
Wow,
celebrated. And
that's
then,
impressive.
yeah, it was really
Yeah,
a fun
that is
time.
good.
It's kind of funny because it was at the hotel, and now it's a Fairmont, but at the time it was
Mhm.
privately owned, and basically everybody that was on staff was from like the best of the Ritz Four Seasons. They just kept bringing in all the best like hospitality team and all that. And so I was really blessed to be a part of. Started as a sous chef in Amaya, which is a 3 meal a day restaurant, and then I got promoted to banquet chef over time, and then. But yeah, it was I had a pretty awesome career. And then, like I said, when I started my own business, I lost. We got kicked out of our townhome. We just it was bad. The picada didn't work out. Then I
Mm.
had to go back to being a private chef for a bit, and then I went into starting a personal chef business after that, and then struggled there really badly, and then started learning how it worked, and then here we are 10 years later on a podcast talking to Chef Lorraine. So God's good.
Here we are. It was all planned at this moment. So what do you want personal chefs to know? Like what underlying theme do you see when, because you talk to a lot of personal chefs all the time. So
Mhm.
what issue are they having, or what do you want them, what's the motto they should be remembering, or the mantra we should all be repeating to ourselves?
Wow, that's a really good question. Well, I think that
Deep.
there's a couple things. That's a great question, by the way, Chef. I see so many, I could tell you on the back of my hand what a lot of them struggle with. And there's different aspects of where they're coming from, of what they struggle with. However, there's some struggles that they face and some of the hurdles that they face are general entrepreneur hurdles, right? There's
Mhm,
general things in that area. I think for any business owner, for any small business owner, for any self-employed person, there's general areas of kind of feeling like you're hitting walls at times.
mhm,
But then there's other things that are very specific to the personal chef space. I think so. I'll kind of break down just a couple of the top ones that I see consistently, right? So, um, I mean, entrepreneurship, I think the mantra that I would say to everybody is, nothing that is actually worth something is going to come easy. It's just not. Nothing
right.
that is actually wanting that is good for you in the sense of like, for your future, for your life, it's not going to be easy. You're not going to have just a la-di-da type of running in the daisy fields, right? And I think that a lot of us, I think that unfortunately, and even I wouldn't say myself included, but when I first started, we're always some level of like, some people are so fearful that they won't even try to attempt because they're so in their
Mhm,
mind of like, oh my god, it's not going to work out, right? And they're going into it
mhm,
like they won't even step into it because their mindset is completely off. Then there's other people where it's like, oh, I could do that, and they have a great attitude and a great bravado, but unfortunately, it comes at a cost of like being a little naive, and they kind of set
mhm.
out thinking it's going to be easy, and then they kind of face some of the music, and it pushes them back. And I think all entrepreneurs have that. And I remember you mentioning earlier in the conversation, Chefpreneur. I actually have my trademark, official trademark document right here hanging on the wall. We own that name,
Oh,
and that
good.
was a
It's
God given
important.
name because it was like, okay, like an entrepreneur, but you're a chef. And
Right.
believe it or
Yep.
not, it's like combining two of the toughest things, right? In the sense of like
Mhm.
chefs in the
Yeah.
industry, it's a very hard job. And
Mhm,
then entrepreneurship is not easy. But again, it's very rewarding when you stay
mhm.
the course. And so, one thing inspirationally is like you just can't give up. I was saying that on the podcast recently that like there's a my scripture that's the scripture I live by for so many years, Galatians 6:9, right? It says, do not grow weary of doing good, for at a proper time you'll reap a harvest if you do not give up. And sometimes as simple as just staying with it. Now, if there's situations that you're coming upon and you still haven't figured out why it's not working for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, there might be something
Mhm.
wrong in the sense of the recipe, quote unquote, you're following, right, in the business. However, that
Right.
doesn't mean that there's not a solution. It just means you haven't found it yet, and you just got to keep working to either find it or have somebody help you find it. So that's on the entrepreneur side. On the personal chef side, it's kind of funny because people that have never really worked in a professional kitchen or a hotel environment or professional catering company, so forth and so on, I find that some of their biggest kind of insecurities come from, are they good enough? Are they a good enough cook or chef where someone's actually going to pay them money to do it? That's like, so I wouldn't say like the non-professionals, but people that maybe came from a different industry. They didn't go to culinary school. They didn't really have jobs in the kitchen or restaurant as far as like a professional or like a business environment. I feel like they struggle a little bit with insecurities there. On the other side, a
Mhm.
lot of professional chefs, sometimes they're very overconfident in their food, and they're like, "Hey,
Yeah.
that's not the problem. The biggest problem for them is how do I market? How do I organize my business? How do I actually do the business side of it?" And I think this is a trap I fell into very early on, especially even with my catering company when I first started. That was like, well, I worked at top hotels. I know how to produce food. I know how to organize a catering menu, or I know how to cook a 4 course, 5 course dinner for people, and like I can produce really high end stuff. But then the problem
Mhm.
is when you switch into entrepreneurship, you're wearing more than that hat, right?
Right.
You have to
Yeah.
learn the systems, the processes, the marketing, the sales, the operational side, like the legal side at times, right? Like you have to understand there's other hats to wear. And it's
Right.
a very common mistake for people to make And so I guess my biggest advice for anybody in this is like, you know, if you're not open to learning those things and not even humble enough to realize that those are the things that are gonna actually move the needle, um, I hope and pray that you open your mind up and understand that those are the things that you need to do. I've been actually thinking about ways on how to introduce this even more to our community. Like, we all have a knife kit. A lot of us have knife kits, right? And we have the chef knife, we have the paring knife for this, and we have the Saturday knife for this, but we don't have enough tools. We don't focus on building enough tools, aka more knives in our toolkit, on sales, on marketing, on operations, on communication. So all of these things become in totalitarian, like the success of what you're going to do in life as far as in your business world. And so, like,
Right.
I know that was a very long-winded answer to your question, but
Oh, no,
kind of
that
wanted
was
to take
great.
it deep. And so, like, because entrepreneurship in general it's a game, and you got to wake up every day and you got to get on the field and take some hits, but you're going to get touchdowns and you're going to get field goals if you don't give up.
Well, for me, being an entrepreneur and being a chef, I've always felt like it's really important to know what you're good at because that's where you draw confidence from and what you have experience in. But it's even more important to know what you're bad at
Yeah.
because if you, if you can do those two things, then you'll know, okay, I'm going to do ABC under my business plan, under my job description. But I know I'm bad at taxes, I'm bad at marketing, and I'm going to delegate.
Hmm.
So it's crucial to know when you get to that point, okay, I need to delegate. I need help. I need help with this.
Yeah.
And you may be good at taxes and good at computer stuff and other things, but if you're cooking, do you really want your time bifurcated by things you don't like to do? And
Right.
when you can just hire somebody and just have that off your back burner, so to speak, off your
Yeah.
plate.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, if you can just learn to delegate, then you can free yourself up to be the best chef that you can be. My problem is always trying to figure out what to charge too,
Yeah.
because
That's a
I
huge
can
one. I
cook pretty
mean,
fast. So charging an hourly rate kind of it makes sense, yet it doesn't. Because if you get better at cooking and you're cooking something you've cooked before, you can fly through it. You know,
yeah.
uh, should we really be charging an hourly rate, or I guess increasing our hourly rate? But you know,
Yeah.
that
No, that's a
that's a
great
big challenge.
question. Is that a question you have for me?
Yeah, like how do you approach if you get more experienced and better at your job, how do you approach like increasing your rate, like be it hourly or weekly or whatever, however you're charging?
No, that's a great question. I mean, and definitely I have the answer for that. Before I answer that, can I ask you, like, as an actual literal example, how are you charging your clients right now? Is it by the hour?
Well, we're kind of going back and forth about it because I do so many different things and I go grocery shopping and so my hours kind of go up and down just based on like the schedule of the day. Like if I'm driving the kids to a practice, so my job's very it's more like a rent-a-mom. I mean, I'm cooking and I'm cooking high level food, but then there's all these other activities I do around it. But the longer I've been there, like I've gotten their kitchen organized, I know what they eat, I know what to get at the grocery store, I know everything. Like I'm getting faster and faster and faster. So they want to pay me hourly, but I want to be paid salary. So we've had a couple conversations about it, and yeah, that's
Well,
kind of where it's kind of out in the
yeah.
air.
I know
Right.
you asked me a question, but now I have to ask a couple more dive deep questions here a
Okay.
little
No.
bit on you specifically. So one of the things that I do see people struggle with is really a little bit of, for instance, like the direction that you're heading. I want to ask you, like, what are your plans? Like, are you wanting to build a business with multiple clients, or are you wanting to be more of an employee for a specific family?
Well, right now, so I'm going through a divorce.
Mm.
So I actually picked up a second job during the day because it has like the health benefits and the 401k and all the things that I'm going to be needing to, progress into retirement comfortably. So that's, during the day shift. And then I cook for the family in the evenings. It pays more, the day job with the benefits, that's a lower hourly rate, but then you're
Mhm.
getting all the benefits. So right now that's a kind of a new thing. So I'm just kind of figuring out that balance.
Okay.
Uh, so I mean, I don't really know that I'd want more clients because I'm more concerned about when you're an entrepreneur, paying for health insurance is very expensive and I want to be able to cover my daughter and have those benefits.
Okay.
So, I mean, I've picked up a couple other chef jobs here and there, but it's not anything I want to expand hugely. It'd be great to be in a position like I did with my staffing agency where I had a lot of chefs and I was sending them out, to go work different jobs because that's something I've experienced with. But
Okay.
so far that doesn't exist.
Okay.
Did that
Yeah.
answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I guess just really plainly, it sounds like you want to be a private chef for an individual family, which is what you have. So I wouldn't say that you're probably heading down the chefpreneur path right now, to be honest. It sounds like you're wanting more of a job. Um, so if that's the case, I would suggest that you probably do just get a salary from them and then just create
Right.
like this is what my responsibility is, and this is what the salary is, and that's it.
Right, right. Instead of, like, trying to mark your time because I'm just getting faster and faster at the job as
Yeah.
I get better at it.
Yeah,
So it's almost
I would
like
say given, getting a salary from them makes the most. Again, I think it sounds like you're stepping into a private chef role, but like slash
right.
a little bit of like, house manager slash private chef role. And in
Mhm.
that case, like I said, I think it's just best that you just really get a salary from them and then go from
Right.
there. If you were wanting to build a business, that's different. I wouldn't even still suggest hourly rate on that either. I would actually suggest more of like a service charge that's a flat rate if you're doing more of like preparing meals, whatever. If you're doing
Mhm.
it more of like a service where you're actually like cooking, serving, and dishing up their stuff on plates and things like that. Again, it's a little bit of a private chef role, yes, but you would be charging by the person, is how we teach, in like a flat rate per person charge. And then you would just be associating that with the dinners that they're booking you for. So it gets a little bit different if we were looking at it from a point of view of like you running it like a business. But again, it sounds like it's more of a full-time job for you per se, or I don't know if it's full-time, like, it is, but it isn't, I think. But like kind of going down that direction a little bit. And then I think from there in the future, you might have to just decide, hey, do I want to build a business? Like there's kind of different sectors, right? If anybody's watching this as well, there's a book. I don't know if you guys ever heard of, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'm sure a lot of people have, right? Have you heard of
I
that book?
Oh, yeah. I have it somewhere in this house.
Yeah. So I like how he says, right, there's four quadrants of kind of the stage of business, right? There's employee, and then the second one is self-employed, and then the third one is business owner, and the fourth one is investor. And the reason why he lays it out in this, and he actually uses an analogy in the book that's very, actually, it just made it very approachable for me as far as like a mental aspect to actually comprehend what he was saying. Was he says, you don't really see anybody like in high school football go from high school to go play on the Baltimore Ravens, where, back in the day, Ray Lewis would be like, you would get murdered, right? Like you can't really go from like being a senior to being a pro especially in football. Like you would probably literally physically die. Your body's not developed enough. You're not a bigger person. So it's very difficult. So he said the same way, it's very difficult to go from employee directly to business owner, because business owner is, again, you're working a little bit more on the business as opposed to in it. And then investor is like, then you're just getting the money from your business as an owner, but then you're taking that money and then now the money's working for you. So it's like in stage one, you're working for the money as an employee. In stage two, you're working for the money, but you own your job basically, right? You own a business, but you own your job. Then in business owner, you own the business that is producing the wealth for you. And then eventually, again, the money that you earn from the business, then you make your money work for you. So that's like the last step of it. But, and there's no right or wrong to any four quadrants. He's just kind of showing you. And so like, where you're at right now, you're kind of a little bit in the self-employed side, but kind of transitioning maybe to being an employee for them per se, like a salary with like roles and responsibilities. However, what you could do is, you kind of have been self-employed. It's not like you're not, right? Because are they paying you as a 1099 right now?
Well, we started out, kind of off the books. I was walking their dogs, started cooking for them, da 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 da. And then like a year and a half ago, we use a service. It's called care.com. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they don't really care.com isn't about chefs or anything. It's more about
Yeah,
Annie, that kind of
yeah.
thing. But anyway, she runs my payroll through that. So I get paid
Okay.
weekly from care.com. So
Got
that
it.
way it's
So
all
you're
legal.
technically self-employed because care.com is going to issue a 1099 at the end of the year.
Well, they take taxes out and Social Security, so I get a W-2
Oh,
or
okay. You do get it. Okay.
yeah,
Okay. I didn't know.
which is better.
Iron
I
Metal.
prefer that. I don't want to
Oh,
mess
okay.
with
Great.
yeah.
So okay. So great. So like, yeah. So I mean, in the future, if you ever did want to build a business that was like, multiple chefs, you have a brand, then it's just really getting clarity on what you want to do. And then from
Right,
there, you figure out, like, I always tell people, like, a lot of people, they're so confused about who, like, I love what you said earlier, like, hey, if I don't know marketing, I hire a marketing person. If I don't know
right,
this, I hire this person. And that is so true. The only thing that we're responsible for is, like, we got to have clarity on where we're going, right? We're not going to get on the bus and put the right people on the positions of the bus, the marketing, the taxes, the this, the that, but yet there's no map and we don't even know where we're going, right? Like,
mhm.
that's the
Or we
first
don't
thing,
have
is
a
like,
driver for the bus,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Don't even get in the bus. Don't even start it up if you don't know where you want to
Right,
go. So we got to figure that out first, right? So you're looking at your life right now and you're like, this is where I want to go, is I want to go. And I'm not saying forever, but in this season of your life,
right,
what you're wanting to do is have something more stable, more, I
right.
got my benefits from this one job that I'm getting, my other kind of second job. I got this family that, obviously you have a great relationship with them,
Oh,
working
yeah, I love
over
them.
3 years, right?
They're
You love
wonderful
them.
people.
So I
Oh, yeah,
think that this is, in the stage of life where you're at, the best decision is probably, again, to kind of negotiate, saying, hey, just pay me this weekly or whatever, and
right.
go through a salary
I
and
think
say,
we're getting
here's what
there.
I
I
can
think
do.
we're getting there, yeah. So I think that'll happen, and I mean, otherwise than that, to me, this is the best solution for me right now because if I worked full time at that first job, you're scratching for hours. It's very
Yeah.
competitive,
Yeah.
and I don't need that. So I
Yeah.
I only need so many hours, and I get the benefits, and that's all I want. And then I have my other job that's just solely mine, and
Yeah.
that's great. And neither one of them's 40 hours. They're both like 20 to 30-ish.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
about 50 hours a week around there. So
And then for people
yeah,
like who's just listening or watching this, who are saying, hey, like, if I'm in a job but I want to start my own business, I want to go that route, there is a way to do that as well. And we even recommend, even in Chefpreneur, people that get coaching from us and kind of mentorship or enroll in one of our programs, or, there's a path that we teach them and guide them through on how to kind of safely leave your job per se. A lot of times we want to get people out of their job, but that doesn't mean, hey, just jump off the cliff,
correct. Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's, I mean, now you could be like me where I did that, which I was a little bit, but I'm not your everyday typical person, right? I'm going to crash and burn and then get myself, dust myself off. I went through all that pain so I can help everybody else not go through that pain. But there is a
oh,
way, like, but I didn't have the clarity. I just knew I was miserable working 80 hours a week and not seeing my
mm,
family. So for me, I just
yeah,
went straight in, but I didn't have the path. I got on the bus. I started the bus. I started driving, and then we're like, where are we going? It's like, I don't really know. I just know I'm heading in this general direction. And again, it's just having clarity on what we want to accomplish. We talked to so many chefs, as you were saying, like, we have mentorship sessions with so many chefs, and we first have to just understand like what are they wanting to achieve and why? Like why are they wanting it? And then most of the people we talk to are like, hey, I want to start a personal chef business, or I want to have multiple clients like you, chef, and things like that. And so at least they're heading in the direction we know we can help them. And then it's like we still help them figure out what are some of those roadblocks. What is your current situation that you're on, like right where you're at? And so like how do we bridge that gap and get you to where you want to go? Because the recipe that we take people through in Chefpreneur, it's very specific to starting a personal chef business, number one. But number two, it's like it's a plan, it's a recipe, it's something that we follow specifically to get them to the other side, to get them from point A to point B. But I love that. I love how you're, really like, kind of again, it's not like they're, writing you up or anything like that. So it's a very cohesive relationship. It sounds like you've created with this
Mhm.
family.
Mhm.
I've been offered a private chef job, and that's the difference, right? Private chefs are usually a full-time employee for somebody or a person or a family or a corporation or something, right? And then a personal chef is people have multiple clients. They kind of usually have their own business, obviously, and so forth and so on. And I've been offered a private chef job by one particular family, um, that I, went to Malibu with, Whistler, Pennsylvania, Mexico, Canada, the whole name,
Mm.
the whole aspect. I traveled with them and stuff like that. I wasn't their full-time chef. They would kind of contract me for a couple weeks at a time here and there, but they offered me a full-time job all the time with an Escalade as a signing bonus and blah, 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 blah.
Wow.
But I was like, I don't want to work for anybody. So like
Yeah.
my own thing was I want to be independent. I don't want,
Mm.
plus, I mean, I won't badmouth them, but just some of the way they treated some of the other staff was not
Mm.
integral, lined up with my integrity. But all that being said, I felt very flattered to be offered a very high salary. I mean, the last
Mhm.
salary they threw at me was 225 a year, which I was like, oh,
Wow.
but I was like, you know what? It's not worth it for me.
Yeah.
It's not, because I would then be, lack of a better term, I would be indebted to them. I would be, a number to them per se. I mean, not literally like a corporation, but
Well,
they
it
would
feels
treat
like
me
they
as,
own you at a certain
yeah,
point in life.
exactly,
They
exactly. So,
start
I
to
mean,
feel like
if
it's
you have the right
always
person,
better that you have other things going on, and that's true even of my day job. My day job knows I have to leave. I have to pick these kids up from school,
yeah,
and they knew that in the first interview. I'm like, "This is how it goes. I can give you these hours, these days, and I'm not working Sundays." You know, and that there's if that was my only job, they could probably say, "Well, you have to work Sun." You know what I mean? They'd have more
yeah,
leverage over me. So
yeah.
it's going pretty good so far. It's a bit of a balancing act, keeping everybody happy, but I'm gonna figure it out.
You're gonna figure it out. Well,
Yeah.
Chef, was there any other questions before we hop off? I mean, I appreciate your time. We've been on for a good hour, and just wanted to ask if there's any other questions you had for me before we end the podcast today.
I have no other questions for today. I just really
Awesome.
enjoyed our conversation and just got new thoughts. It's always good to, keep the creative juices flowing. So,
Well, I appreciate that. And again, it was a blessing having you here, and I really appreciate
thank
your
you.
time as well. And for anybody listening here, or watching us, you can catch us on YouTube. You can catch this replay of the live. If you're listening on podcasting, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcast, all of it, wherever you get your podcast. You can find the Chefpreneur Podcast. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, hit that bell for notifications to be notified every time we go live. And again, Chef, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your time. And I hope you have a great new year. We appreciate your time again. And 2025 is going to be a great year for all of us.
Yeah, happy New Year, everybody. Thank you
Uh,
so much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. God bless you guys. Happy New Year. Take care.